Major League Rugby teams dropping like flies. Results for both the men's and women's USA Eagles sides leave a lot to be desired. The MLR Championship game TV rating and attendance damn near diabolical. It is all doom. It is all gloom for rugby in America. Is it really though? Look, I'm not saying any of those are positive. I'm not saying any of those are reasons to celebrate. I'm just not sure the situation is as dire as it's being made in some corners. And I think it's also important not to lose sight of the bigger picture here. The Guardian led off with the quote, pretty dark right now as it relates to Major League Rugby. Compared to what? There wasn't even a league here 10 years ago, and 9 years ago, pro rugby stopped by for a few months and vanished without a trace. The women's USA Eagles, that team went like 5-23 between 2016 and 2021. The men, they didn't even win a game at the 2015 and 2019 World Cups, don't even qualify for the 2023 Rugby World Cup. I'm just not sure it's dark in comparison to all of those glorious moments. It's certainly not ideal that Major League Rugby has lost 2 franchises and saw the 2 teams in California merge into one. By the way, speaking of rugby in California, if you want to see the US play Japan in September in Sacramento, but don't want to pay the absurd $39 lowest price for a ticket, the Legion have a 25% off promo code on their website. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. For the record, I don't get a cut of anything. I'm not promoting anything. I don't even think they want me telling you about that. I think they want to reserve it for their fans, but I'm doing it anyway because $39 for tickets to anything at Heart Health Park in Sacramento is absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, for all the negatives in relation to MLR and American rugby in general, there were plenty rays of light shining through the darkness. For instance, the USA women's team just signed contracts for the upcoming World Cup and have one of America's biggest stars in all of sports, Alona Mar, in their ranks. The doubleheader in Washington, D.C. brought out great crowds for both the men's and women's teams. The women did 15K plus, the men got 19K plus. Those are good crowds for USA Rugby. And the quality of play in Major League Rugby this season was so much better than it was in the first few seasons. It's still a lot of penalties. It's still a lot of, I think we can say nicely ambitious, some would say reckless play. It gets a bit start-stoppy at times because of all of that, yet the quality, the speed, it's so much better than what we saw years ago. Let's also not lose sight of the fact Major League Rugby is still exceptionally young. In the rugby world, we saw last year Super Rugby lost the Melbourne Rebels. In America, there are plenty examples of this. I mean, heck, Major League Soccer lost Chivas USA in 2014, still relatively recent. And that was 18 years after the MLS began play. MLB wanted to remove 2 teams in 2000. All you needed to do to buy an NHL franchise in the 1990s was say you had the money, say you were good for it. To expect an amazing, flawless, perfect league of exponential growth is just simply unrealistic. Yeah, it's a shame that Major League Rugby sides do continue to fold. That's a bummer. And honestly, you really would like to see the Eagles 15 sides be a little better now, or at least a little more consistent. Good news, bad news, positive, negative, glass half empty, glass half full. There's like a million different ways you can look at it. I just don't think the narrative of doom or success is correct. For me personally, rugby in America has plateaued. Some really solid growth over the past few years, but things have just become a little flat across the board, especially in 2025. I've been trying to get into the St. Mary's and Cal archives because they have a lot of physical stuff as it relates to rugby in those schools' early days in the 1900s and 1910s and all of the stuff they were doing around the world and with foreign teams coming in. It's an amazing story that I hope to cover one day. But as I was going through that process, I connected with another American rugby fan. His take on Major League Rugby and really the sport as a whole is that it's like trying to climb an escalator that's going down. You can make incremental progress here and there. You also slide back down from time to time. The reality is, though, you're never going to reach the top without an unlikely Herculean effort, and that's just probably not going to be the case with rugby. As you can tell, this analogy really stuck with me. It makes a lot of sense, and you have to look no further than the discourse around rugby in America, both national team and club, to see that. It really almost mirrors that. You see all of these people championing the incremental growth, the positive steps. Then you do have the folks who just want to focus on the negatives, the step backs. You can see both the good and bad here. I don't know if one particularly outweighs the other. And I just sort of believe, understanding this, it's time for a change. And really, I think that change starts with Major League Rugby. They could keep doing what they're doing the same thing, making progress up the escalator only to slide back down. Or maybe you just get off the escalator and go try climbing up the stairs. I cannot help but look at the Premier Lacrosse League and admire what they have done in the past 4 or 5 years now. Their approach to building not simply a league, but the sport as a whole is something that you have to respect. I'm not a lacrosse guy, by the way. I don't really know the sport. I've tried using a lacrosse stick on multiple occasions and I've done nothing but embarrass myself. But we can all admit lacrosse is far bigger in America than it gets credit for. It's also the national outdoor pastime of Canada, in case you were wondering. Anyway, the PLL really understood their markets, their audiences, the sporting culture, and created something that has had a tangible impact. It's far from perfect, but overall, you can see the PLL has had a positive impact on the entire sport of lacrosse in America. No one knows if the league has reached break even. It's unlikely to be a money-making endeavor. It's also probably not losing nearly as much money as I'd expect most MLR franchises are. Looking beyond the money, what the PLL does extremely well is builds up efforts at the grassroots level. It gets more people playing lacrosse at a younger age. To that end, and you can probably see where I'm going to go here, the biggest change Major League Rugby can make is to go to a touring model. Take the show on the road instead of trying to operate like a traditional sports league. We know the difficulties trying to progress with that model brings. More importantly, we also know the sport of rugby isn't serving all of its hotbeds. Northern California, New York, there are a lot of markets where rugby is extremely popular that the sport just doesn't go professionally. A touring model alleviates some of the stagnation we've been seeing. Now we have to start by addressing the biggest issue here and the most likely one to hold back MLR from touring, and that is that individual ownership happens. Each club is owned by someone else, and in order for this to be agreed upon, to ever to work, you have to get all of the existing owners to come together, pool resources, and then split everything equally. History shows us it tends to be problematic, and that's putting it as nice as possible. PLL doesn't have that issue. There are the single entity ownership structure, so one body owns everything. They can do whatever the hell they want to do with it. Hypothetically though, let's just say all Major League Rugby owners are able to get on board with this idea. Then how does it work? First, I think we need to look at how many games MLR currently plays. Like, why are we going with 16 games right now? Yeah, I do know the answer to that is because teams want more home dates. They want to sell tickets and all of that, but Super Rugby has 14 games. I get URC and Premiership Rugby, they are at 18 game seasons. I just don't think Major League Rugby needs to be playing 16 games each year. Let's scale that down, and then each of the existing teams, whether they're number 6 or 8, they all get their homecoming weekends like you see in PLL, where you go to the home team and they just get to celebrate their hometown. I think you could expect something similar in Major League Rugby, especially in Houston, Seattle, DC. I think some of these markets that have proven to support their Major League Rugby franchises would be great venues to have everyone just come and play for a weekend. Then you have 4, whatever the number ends up being, non-home team weekends, and you really have flexibility on where you want to put them. I've mentioned some of the markets already, but New York, Northern California, put one up in Berkeley. I'd love to bring Canada back in the mix. I know it's not USA Rugby connected, it's USA Rugby adjacent, but if you want to make some money, Toronto, Vancouver, I think they'd support it. I'll also die on this hill. The Americas need to do a British Irish Lions style team and tour. Take America, Canada, Uruguay, Chile, not Argentina, but all of the other Americas nations, put the best team out possible, hire an experienced coach, and see what they can do in Europe or elsewhere in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm not saying they'll be super competitive, but they'll certainly be more competitive than the individual nation playing as South Africa or Australia or New Zealand, as we've seen in the past. And for a sport that is desperate for new challengers like rugby, maybe you can develop something there. So yeah, I would just love to see a combined Americas team go on a tour. England, France, I don't even care. I think it would be a really cool way to support rugby in this part of the world, the Americas, and just do something different and unique and potentially fun. That's not why we're here though. The idea of Major League Rugby going to a touring model is really based on three concepts as to why I think it would be more successful than continuing down the path of sameness. First and foremost, it's the cost savings. I don't know what this would be, but it does seem like it would be cheaper. I mean, that's one of the big selling points for PLL doing this, is it does allow them to save money. Lacrosse, of course, has fewer players than 15-a-side rugby union. So, I mean, again, I don't know how the math works here. I'm not a math guy. I do think you might be able to save some costs, but that's for the accountants to figure out. The two big things that put me in favor of this type of model are simple. First, you want to introduce people into more than just the game, the 80 minutes spent on the pitch. It's everything else that surrounds rugby that makes the sport so unique and so popular. And then the second thing is that you want to leave the paying audience wanting more. Starting with the former, we know rugby is as much about camaraderie as it is the game played itself. Rugby union is just so unique in that regard. It's about the friendships, it's about the bond, it's about the competition, of course, but then it's about celebrating that competition after the fact. And we all know just how unbelievably welcoming everyone in rugby is. When someone new goes to a rugby game or partakes in a rugby training session, the first thing they talk about is just how friendly and how welcoming and how supportive everyone was. And I think that's still a message that's not really getting out there in America. It's not a case of us versus them, it's a case of may the better team win, and regardless of who does win, we're all gonna have a lot of fun after the match. Having a touring weekend in one specific city, I really feel gives you the opportunity to highlight this, just to show everyone the other side of rugby beyond the game itself. It's also a lot easier to market in a single city for a weekend. Promoting an 8-game home slate in one city isn't easy, and it becomes more about the game than it does the other stuff. And I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm saying it can be a challenge. There's a reason why everyone goes to the carnival once, but if the carnival stayed around forever, most people aren't gonna go to it. It's just kind of human nature, and it's like that for sports as well. Now, I will admit openly, this screws over the diehard fans, the people in Seattle, the people in Houston, in DC, that really have proven they can support a professional rugby franchise. And I get why they would be upset by this and only getting one weekend a year to have professional rugby in their town. Yet I'm really not convinced there's a viable path forward for Major League Rugby and rugby in general pursuing what it has been pursuing. Like I mentioned, have we plateaued? How do you grow the current model from here? Is there an avenue to grow the current model of just having a professional rugby league in America? Maybe, but I'm not confident of that. Certainly not as confident as I was, say, 6 months or a year ago. Maybe this is just a bump in the road, but what if it's not a bump in the road? Maybe if this is the plateau, then you should try something different. And you can never go wrong by leaving people wanting more. And when you do these touring weekends, you do leave your audience in that city wanting a little more after the fact if they enjoyed what they saw and they experienced. You can put on a really fun weekend of rugby, highlight everything that makes the sport great, highlight all of the camaraderie and the welcoming nature of it, as opposed to spreading it out over 3, 4, 5 months, whatever the case may be. That is a much easier sell to the casual fan or the person who may not know all that much about the sport. More importantly though, with that feeling of wanting more, you are more likely to get people involved at the grassroots level. Let's just say hypothetically, one of these touring weekends does 10,000 people, right? You do 5,000 a day for 2 days. And of that total, 20 or 30 new folks just want to become involved in rugby afterwards. It may not seem like a lot, but 20 or 30 new people playing rugby or learning to coach rugby or just being a part of that community in that town, it really adds up over time and it expands across the country. That is, of course, in addition to all the merchandise you will sell, all the potential new TV viewers you may get down the road who want to see more because you left them wanting more. Leave on a high note, as opposed to being in a situation where a person comes out to watch a game or two and dips out or just forgets about it. While we're at it, why not reach out to Women's Elite Rugby and see if they could potentially be involved? Just make it about rugby in all its glory, not simply Major League Rugby. Get men's and women's professional teams. I mean, invite college teams, invite sevens. It should just be a festival of rugby in one place across the weekend. How you want to spread it out, if you want to do Saturday, Sunday, if you want to throw a game or two Friday night, you can do it a multitude of different ways, right? There's no right or wrong way to put this together. It's just something different, and it's something worth considering. That's because when you look at what's happening in America surrounding rugby union, everyone is pulling in the same direction. Everyone is trying to move the sport forward, but they're all doing so in a very different manner. And I'm just not sure if that's the most effective way to make progress here. And this isn't to say progress hasn't been made. We've seen a lot of steps forward in the past 5 years, in the past decade, really. I mean, look at what rugby was in 2015. And I mean, I know the men's Eagle side isn't as good as it was at the 2011 World Cup in that generation, but overall, I think you would argue the sport is in a better place today than it was in 2015. To that end, I don't buy into the American rugby doom and gloom narrative. It has plateaued, and that is a concern. That is something you need to address. And when something does plateau, you likely need to change it up. You need to try something different if you're going to return to the path of growth. If you keep doing the same thing once you have plateaued, the results don't really change that much. Major League Rugby, the men's and women's Eagle sides, they will all remain in this holding pattern. Hosting the World Cup doesn't change that. It is change which changes that. People who are introduced to rugby union in America tend to fall in love with it. I mean, no one is sort of like sticking a toe into rugby. When they are introduced and they experience the sport for themselves, they love it or they don't, but it's really an all-in thing. But if you can't make that initial connection with fans and you can't spread the word of rugby stateside, it's all really for naught. It doesn't even need to be Major League Rugby touring. There can be other solutions. There probably are other solutions out there that could work just as well, but it does feel like rugby in America does need to change it up. It does need to try a different tactic with the World Cup, the men's and women's World Cup on the horizon. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to know more about the low-key rugby hotbed that is Sacramento, my hometown, check out the video in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. Until next time, I am Cheyenne Hollis. This is the Touchback, and as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.